Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 with Julie and Pat. On this episode, we're going to talk about the education challenges faced along the way. We're going to talk about social care, the fights the parents have to go through to get what's right, and the support that person needs. But we're also going to talk about the future and what that holds for Pat, Julie and Harry. Do you think the services, this is a very hard question, do you think the services ever took advantage because they knew you could pay for things privately?
Well, when I first moved to Derby and got Harry into the school in Derby, then social services from East Sussex had referred us over to Derby, and a trainee social worker come to see me at home. And she did say, "What do you want respite for?" And I says, "So I can do all the things that I need to do, me shopping, pay my bills, clean my house, because when Harry is at home, I'm 100% focused on him." And she looked around my house and she says, "Well, get a cleaner."
Wow. I reported her for saying that.
When you talked about the process to get a statement in the EHCP, what was your experience of being able to get something like a blue badge for your son?
Again, first blue badge that I applied for got rejected. And I did go to a charity in Derby where they have solicitors that work half a day a week, just advising, and they filled in forms again for the blue badge, and that's when we actually got awarded it. But yeah, it took certain work.
That was a battle, wasn't it? You didn't get rejected just once. He got rejected 2 or 3 times, and you appealed it. And we had a son that we would get out of the car in a busy supermarket, would hear an engine noise, and then bolt across the road. And so the blue badge thing was important, so we didn't have to cross the road for his safety. And what we were told was that there's certain buzzwords that they look for on an application, and we hadn't used them. But he qualified for it. So that was where the sort of charity, the legal charity, came in to help us.
And they also helped me with DLA, because for the first 3 years that we were back in UK when I was in East Sussex, I didn't claim any DLA or carer's allowance or anything, because for one reason I didn't know about it, and nobody comes forward and says this is what you're entitled to. And then when I moved to Derby, I applied for DLA for Harry, at which point he was in a special needs school, non-verbal, coming up to teenage years, and I got DLA rejected.
Really?
Yeah. So again, I went to Disability Direct, which is a charity, and they sat and filled the forms in with me, and he did get awarded it, yeah.
Because even now at the start of the process, to be able to get a diagnosis in itself is such a challenge for parents to be able to get.
It is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And I did sit on a board of trustees for 7 years of an autism charity. And it was one thing that I fought for with charity for quite a long time, was to provide free diagnosis for children, because you're on a waiting list for so many years.
So in terms of, obviously you've talked about social care, you've talked about education, you talked about tribunals, blue badges. What was the biggest injustice you felt Harry has ever faced because of the system? You can answer, Pat.
I'd say not. I don't think there's enough services for children and adults on the spectrum that are at the top end of the spectrum. So I think their lives are limited because there's not the services that are available. We have had so many services that are broke down. We've had education that's broke down. We've had people refuse to work with Harry. And it's all because there's not enough services for that end of the spectrum. I think at this point in time in this country, autism is a bit of a buzzword. Like I said right at the beginning, people say, oh, my brother's son's got a friend who's on autism spectrum. And I'm not denying that these people are on the autistic spectrum, but it is a spectrum and it goes from 1 to 100. And I think that top 1% that's on that 100 percentile of that spectrum, there is not enough services in this country for that 1%. And because it's a small percentage, it don't get talked about. People don't shout about it. People don't talk about it. It's all now about inclusion. Let's get as many autistic children into mainstream schools that we can. And I agree with that. But not every autistic child is going to be able to go to a mainstream school with support. What happens to that very, very small amount of children that are on the top end of the spectrum? There's not enough places for them. And they do get forgotten about in children's and in adults.
Do you think schools and teachers really understand autism and learning disability?
I think they try to.
No, I think there's a little bit of knowledge, and that's in our journey, which started 19 years ago tomorrow. There's social awareness has gained momentum, and I think there's a lot more awareness now than there was when we first got on the autism path, and I think there's a lot of people that know a little, but by no means does that make them experts.
I think professionals and teachers and even social services, they only understand a certain level of autism. We are a family with a child that's on the end of the spectrum. And
At one extreme.
Yeah, and I just don't think that there's many professionals that understand where you are when you are at that level.
So obviously you've mentioned you've been at the board of trustees for an autism charity. And obviously you probably had many discussions about this. What do you think needs to change in the education system to be able to support children like yours?
I think because autism and learning disability, don't forget, a learning disability can make a massive difference to a child with autism. A child with autism and no learning disability, I do agree that with support, a mainstream school may be the best place for them. I totally support that. But what I don't support is that that's right for every child with autism. And I think people forget about the learning disability that often comes with autism. And when you've got that autism and the severe learning disability, you are never going to get that person to fit into a mainstream school. And in all honesty, it's not fair on the other children that are at that mainstream school either, because there's too much disruption. So even though I would, at the beginning of our journey, that was what I craved for my son. I wanted him into a mainstream school, and I did everything to get him into that mainstream school. We both did. We had meetings with all kinds of people to be able to get Harry into that mainstream school. And we did it, but it became very apparent very quickly that it wasn't the right place for him. It was the right place for me to want him to be, but it wasn't the right place for him to be. And so I think the education system needs to be more variant. There needs to be more choice for the whole spectrum, not just the beginning of the spectrum for the children that need emotional support I think that's perfectly fine. Give them the emotional support and any regulation that they might need to go to that mainstream school and give them access to a full education. But let's not forget the others that aren't capable of that.
And obviously with all the battles that you've talked about, there's many. Which one are you the most proud of that you won?
For me, the most significant was when we came home to Derby and I'm saying you because it was you, got Harry's placement at school in Derby.
It was surreal that way because I'd fought for 3 years for the place in Sussex at the ABA school, and ultimately, I had counselling for 6 months. I was an emotional wreck. That's probably the lowest I've ever been in my life when I went through that tribunal. But I then applied at Derby and just received a phone call. They went, "Oh yeah, we'll fund his place."
But one of the factors there was that when we first got involved back in the UK with East Sussex County Council, you were totally naive. By the end of that period, you were an expert. So you started again fresh with another local authority, but you were dealing with them from a totally different standpoint. You were talking to them, you were telling them things they didn't know.
That's true, I was. But the two different councils, I went from East Sussex, who had really good social services and social care, but the council wouldn't fund the school place. I then moved to Derby and Harry got his school place immediately, no fight or anything, but social services in Derby were absolutely awful. So it's postcode lottery. It literally is a postcode lottery where you live.
But having said that, the complex behaviour team at Derby were very
the complex behaviour team was
so health. But then when we moved to where we live now, initially that was not the case, was it?
No, we then made one final move, which was from Derby. So we went from Derby City Council to Nottinghamshire County Council, and that's because the school in Derby closed down. So we then got him in at Sutherland House at Nottingham. I don't know if I'm supposed to name. So he then got into the school at Nottingham, and we went on to Nottinghamshire County Council, who I have to say, both education and social care really came together.
Yeah, they worked absolutely brilliant. From our previous experiences, they were great.
And I've not had any problems with Nottinghamshire County Council regarding education, and social care were extremely good. As I say, we've had a lot of services that has failed because of challenging behaviours, but they never gave up. They kept trying different avenues for him to go to. He did go to Children's Respite at one point, but then it was a service that had 8 beds. It was fantastic. It looked amazing when we went round. The staff were really good, but it got to the point as Harry got a little bit older that they couldn't accommodate him with other children.
Yeah, and that was sort of when he was adolescent, basically.
So ultimately,
transitioning from child to adult.
That
last year,
it just started to fail. He then moved to Adults Respite, which only lasted 4 months because that failed.
But in terms of comparing different support systems, we went from a very supportive complex behaviour team at Derby to the opposite in terms of CAMS, and that was probably out of everything, probably our worst experience.
I would say if you're looking for advice for any families, don't listen to CAMS. It sounds awful, I know, but
Do you think that's also a postcode lottery, though?
It could be.
Maybe. My experience of CAMS has been...
Well, it's got to be actually, because we did have a temporary appointment, Dr. Redwood, when she was great, wasn't she?
I forgot about CAMS. CAMS, that were another really, really bad time.
I want to ask you now about residential care. So I know Harry lived with you at home from birth up to being 18. At what point, what made you make the decision about residential care, and, tell us about how you got there.
There were different reasons that we come to that conclusion in the end.
First of all, we as parents never ever imagined that we would consider our child living somewhere else. We never contemplated. It was beyond our scope of thinking that Harry would live somewhere else other than with us. So, but it got to the point where
Harry's world were getting smaller, because for all his life, he'd been everywhere. We as a family, he'd been included in everything. He'd never missed out on anything. And then he went into some different forms of social care and education, and he still had quite a wide social life with us, obviously. I used to take him out every day after school. I used to cinema, you name it, we did it. But it was getting to the point that Harry was nearly 6 foot tall. I had no physical control over Harry's behaviour at all. So it was becoming unsafe. Not just unsafe for me, but unsafe for other people in the community. And we were advised that if Harry, I had broken ribs, broken bones, black and blue.
Oh, there was one incident in a public, and in the pub.
Oh yeah.
You'd taken him for some lunch, hadn't you?
A place where I'd taken him 100 times before, and he spilt some Coke on his trousers, and he ran to the toilet. I think at this point he was 17, so he was a man. He ran to the toilet, he took all his clothes off, and he ran back through the pub.
Naked.
And there were families in there, and it was a shock. And I managed to get my coat around him, and I got him back to the table because it was a booth. So I was keeping him covered up as much as possible. He refused to put his clothes back on because they'd got wet. So I took my clothes off in the toilet and put his wet clothes on and brought out my dry clothes and putting them on. That's how bad it was to get him just out of that place. And we were told that if he attacked anybody in public, or that is classed as sexual.
Anyway, it's inappropriate, and we were really concerned about if the police had got involved, either through him hurting somebody or having one of these episodes where he was stripping off. We just worried about we started worrying about his well-being, in terms of, if he got arrested, what would happen?
Yeah, and the repercussions to him. Yeah.
And we were told that by a health professional from continuing healthcare, that at any point, if anything like this happened in public, the decision on where Harry would go would be taken away from us.
We asked that question, and that was the answer.
Is that at that point then when you start to look?
Yeah, and Jayla's mentioned continuing health. They were very, very supportive.
And we was on a Teams call with continuing healthcare. It sounds like we're always crying, and we both broke down. And that was when we said, okay, we will, we can look. at least look. And that was all we agreed to at the beginning. And in all honesty, his profile went out to several companies, but because of the challenging behaviours, and this goes back to what I said earlier, there's not enough services for people with challenging behaviours.
But then the two groups assessed him, including you guys, and we, the rest is history, really.
Do you trust the adult care system when you compare it to the education system? Because you've now gone through both.
I think we've had the change from social care to health, and I think that makes a huge difference. I felt like, although in Nottinghamshire, I've got to say, social care, we did feel supported. I had some really good people working with me in social care.
Yeah.
And now Pat now is retired from work. He is as on everything as I am, but for years it was me driving everything. I am a parent that wants to know everything. I want to know the ins and outs of everything. I want to know the whys. I want to know the ifs and buts and everything. So I've always found it good if people will work with me as opposed to working just separately and then telling us what might be available. I've always found it better to talk to people myself and get a better idea of what is expected. And I think in social care in Nottinghamshire, they really did work well with me. And when we moved to health, when you became so much more involved because you weren't at work,
The same pressures.
they really were supportive.
I think you said something to me a few weeks ago, which I reflected on, and I thought, you know what, that's absolutely spot on. Because you said that, the trust and everything you put into to the carers and the that look after your son, that when they ask you to be involved and to do things, you want to do it because you want to give back in that way and have that relationship.
But wherever Harry has attended, whether it be education or social care, I've always got involved.
Yeah.
I've always been part of the process. And like birthdays, we would invite his social care staff. And we've had some fantastic people that work with Harry that we've built relationships with as well.
Yeah.
That have continued, really. And I think you've got to work together. As a parent, you have got to work with whoever is looking after your son. Don't fight them, work with them. If something's not right, talk about it. Don't let it fester. Don't let it get bigger than what it originally started with. I'm a big believer in this is wrong, let's put it right. I don't blame anybody. I never have done. In all the years that I've been dealing with services, I try not to blame anybody. I just say, this is wrong, this is what we can do to make it better.
I think what Scott's referring to is was that we were that happy with Harry's care that we were more than happy to reciprocate and then do what we could in return.
Yeah, I think a bit of both, because it's great when you're involved in the running of our services as really. What would you say your relationship's like with his carers now?
Oh, well,
Fantastic.
I mean, I've got to say that we are delighted with what we see. We think that there's some really good people, and I mean, we're comfortable leaving Harry in somebody else's care, and for us that's massive. That's the biggest statement we can make, and we really are happy with what we see. I mean, there's a few tweaks here and there, but
I would say just say let's do this.
life's not perfect, and it's it's always going to be a work in process.
Do you think you was lucky to find that, or do you think, what advice would you give to another family that were exploring residential?
In all honesty, I think we were lucky. And I think we were lucky to get anywhere, because Harry's profile, nobody just wanted to touch it.
But not just that. You guys have been absolutely marvellous. And we feel that we've got a good relationship right from the guys on the day-to-day on at the shop floor level, right through to you guys. And if we're not if we need to discuss anything, we just pick up the phone, and generally speaking, it's very receptive and very responsive.
Do you I know this was a very difficult thing for you guys to do, and to be able to reach out on the phone and say, yes, I will look at residential care, and even going to look around, there was always that thing of Harry will no longer live with us. Are you happy you made that decision now, or do you still want him back home with you guys?
I'll always want him back at home, but saying that, I think we made the right decision for Harry.
Yes, they are happy, right? But that doesn't mean we don't miss it. Okay, but it's the right setting for him. His quality of life is better. Our quality of life is better. Fortunately, we only live an hour away, and that enables us to come and visit him on a regular basis, which we do.
I've got a question for you, Jill.
As well, let me just ask this.
Go on.
Do you think, as a parent, that when you come to terms with that, your son requires more care than what your other son needs, and that you make a realization in your head that they're going to be with you for the rest of your life, and you're going to be living with you, and because I don't know if this is going to stick into the head, but like, I've come to a conclusion that my daughter will always need me and will probably live with me. I can't see her living with anyone else. And then you gear yourself up for that, and you prepare yourself up that whatever you do in your life, they will do with you. And then you've got to change it all again then, where you're finding for them somewhere else to live.
I think for me personally, in Harry's 19 years, I have had so many different scenarios for the future that as Harry's needs have got more, have had to change. I never envisaged Harry living anywhere else other than with us.
I can remember when we were talking about selling our house and buying 2 semi-detached houses on a new build site and getting the builder to put in to adjoining door, so Harry had his own address and could stand on his own 2 feet, and we lived next door for when he wanted his bum wipe here. I mean that
at one time we were going to buy a cafe so we could have a job carrying coffee out and washing the dishes. But all these things that we had thought about for the future, gradually, they all changed, and it got to the point where the only goal I had was to get to the end of the day.
How has your life changed since Harry has moved into residential setting?
Well, you would have noticed Julie's tan.
Oh, it's lovely tan. I remember Julie once saying to me, don't be silly, I'm never going on holiday.
You know,
How many have you been on, Julie?
yeah. I won't go for more than a week.
I will never forget.
More than
And I said to Julie in her living room, I will ask you the same question in a year.
I still get the occasional text where we're off going on holiday. Keep an eye on Matt and Harry.
Yeah. Well, I always ring Ricky from airport.
Yeah, I know he's.
And I say, right, I'm giving you full responsibility now, Ricky. And he goes, Julie, I've already got full responsibility. I'm like, no, you haven't. It's because I'm leaving country.
Yeah.
So our lives have changed. Well, it was unimaginable, really, when you do the 2 comparisons. So our lives have become our lives again. And we've said this a few times, we've become parents instead of carers.
Yeah.
And Harry's world has opened back up again. So he's happier because he's not contained. He's not getting cabin fever.
Is that every day?
If you could guarantee one thing for his future, what would it be?
That he's happy.
And with people that understand him.
Yeah.
And some of the staff now
Here, yeah.
do understand it. And that makes his life.
I understand the communication is what
Yes.
Pat's
Do you think there's enough preparation for parents for that point? Because you often hear about the early years, the early diagnosis, you go through school, and then you've got your adult care. Do you think there's enough information out there from the research you've done about preparing for when you as parents and not? Yeah.
I don't think it's a subject that people like to talk about.
But have you researched that?
No.
We've got wills and trusts in place and things like that, but
Yeah, financially we've got, we're prepared for that, but
I think up till very recently, we've been crossing bridges as we get to them because we just haven't had the headspace and the time, the mental capacity to do much else really.
and I think in the last few months, to be honest, I've been enjoying Harry. I've been enjoying visits. I've been enjoying the photos that I get. I've been relishing in the fact that he's happy and he's laughing and and that may not last for, especially, for a child like Harry, the emotional regulation can change on the drop of a hat, which is why now I try to enjoy the times that are good, and then I'll just deal with the times that aren't when they come.
I mean, he's 19 tomorrow, and we still referring to him as a child.
Well, he'll always be my child, won't he? James is still my child.
I think it might be fitting to ask you this question. What's the most beautiful moment you've had as your son's parents?
God, millions.
We get a lot back.
We get a lot of love.
I mean, we've often said, I've said it 100 times, that we are lucky because we get love back from Harry, and not everybody, not every parent with a child that's got autism gets that experience, and we're so fortunate.
There's not one moment. There just isn't.
I think one of the highlights for me for seeing you both was the prom. To see how made up you were. He was in a suit, and he
walked into the middle of the dance floor, and he looked at all the people from college, and his face just lit up. And at that point, I crumbled with joy, but the emotion of it was. So yeah, that was a lovely.
But you see, for me, was when I first met you at your house. So I had seen Harry at school before, and I went to then see you at home. When I would say you both were the most vulnerable, we often see parents. But, I knew you were going through a really hard time. And the love between you and him, and how he always seeked you, and he always put arms around you, always seeking for that reassurance and kisses and hugs. Yeah. And how you just kept that going for him. For me, it's the highlight.
I mean, we went to see him before we came here to do this, and he stood at the window so excited. But then we know that he's happy because when he's had his fill of us, he tells us to leave. Now, if there were any point that he wasn't happy, that would not happen.
And that's it's in one respect, it's a little disappointing that he continued to go. But in another respect,
It's reassuring.
reassuring.
And the first time he told us to leave, I was devastated. I was like, God, crying.
So out of all, obviously, we're now going through the reflection of all the questions we've been asking you, and you've shared a lot of the hurdles that you've had. What was the hardest thing you've had to accept throughout this journey?
That he wouldn't live with us anymore.
Over the diagnosis?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, for me, is in being non-verbal.
Yeah.
We held on to the hope and the expectation that Harry would speak at some point. And for me,
For a long peak.
for me, that that realization is that was a difficult one when we kind of realized that it's probably not likely.
If Harry could listen to this conversation we've had today, what would you want him to know from her?
That we love.
That we love him, and I think he does know that. Top and bottom, at the end of the day, that's all he needs to know. And we believe that Harry is happy where he is because the environment that he's in, other people are happy, as in his staff are happy and they're happy to be around him and they're happy in their job because there's so many other places in care and places that we've experienced where for the staff, it is a job. And they go and they do the 8 hours and they leave and they get paid at the end of the month. We believe from what we see, and we are here often, that the staff here are happy to be here.
And it's like his key worker today. As Zoltan's told us that he's coming in tomorrow early to prepare for Harry's birthday. So he doesn't have to do that. So that's that's a big statement.
Hi, a quick message from me. I hope you're enjoying episode 2 of This Isn't a Handbook so far. Please like, subscribe and share across all the platforms that we have it available on, which is Spotify, Amazon Music and Apple Podcasts. It really is integral that you do share and do like and subscribe. It's help us get our future guests. And if you really want us to get people that are exciting, interesting and to stay on topic, the best way for us to be able to do that is for you to be able to make it a success through listening and sharing it. And please share with us any suggestions that you think may be good for us to interview, or anyone who you may be able to talk in and get in contact with us through our social media pages or through any other way that you feel necessary. But please get in contact with us, and the success of it will be down to yourselves. Thank you.
So if you were to go back in time now to Dubai, to Julie and Pat, at that doctor's office being told he's got autism, what would you say to them?
Get ready for a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's
And a fight.
difficult times ahead.
Yeah.
But perseverance, and you will come through it.
I think we're quite positive people. And it's not always been easy to be positive in this autism life. It isn't easy to be positive.
But we have found that when one is low, the other one compensates. I'm talking about me and Julie here. So we do kind of balance
Not
people.
consciously either. There's been times when we've had Harry at home, when we've really been in the middle of challenging behaviours, and I can get to the point where I just can't take any more. I can't take, the physical side, the emotional side, and I've just put my head in my hands and I'm done. And Pat's been able to deal with that situation, but then it could be a week later when it's vice versa, and it's not. I haven't looked at Pat and gone, "Oh, we can't cope right now, so I better take over." It was always a subconscious thing that whenever one were failing, the other one were able to pick it up.
Yeah.
I understand why divorce rate is so high for parents with special needs children. Yeah, I can understand why it is high, because the level of stress that you can be under, and as for parents like us, the stress of the violence, the damage, the incidents themselves can really, really just take everything out of you.
Do you think some parents sometimes, this is a really hard one as well, sometimes stick together because they need two people to support that person?
Well, I think that probably happens. That's not the case with us, but yeah, the love of the child, the parental instinct to do what's best for the kids.
Because I guess in the struggles you guys mentioned, I bet in those times it was hard for you guys to take time as a couple. You were just firefighting.
We didn't have the time together as a couple for many, many years.
I think that's it. And I think it's about, you've got to work as a team really to do it. And I think, and if you can do that, and you can take the rough with the smooth, that's what relationships are all about, aren't they, really? And I think they do have it is a difficult and it is a strain, like most things in life can be. And, you're a testament that, you people can make it work, but I completely 100% get why it doesn't work.
I know many, many families that have not stayed together purely because of the stress of bringing up, a child with special needs. Many. Well, I think the statistics are about 80%, aren't they, of families break down of children with special needs.
And it's particularly difficult for when you do what we do for a living, and you receive all the training that we receive. We're supposed to be experts in it, and it all goes out the window when you get home, because when it's your son or daughter,
you don't have your professional handbook.
No, you don't, and you do what you think's right,
and then emotion takes a place.
And it's not that. Is when you go home, I want to be Sarah. I don't want to be behaviour analyst.
Yeah,
I want to be mum.
And to be honest, that's what I find now. Harry lives at the Limes, that I can now be his mum.
Yeah.
All the jobs that a carer does, I'm having all the enjoyment. We came Easter Sunday and watched him do his Easter egg hunt, but we didn't have to clear up the mess afterwards.
Win-win.
And the other thing is, when we have been here and Harry has gone into a challenging behaviour, then we're asked to leave. We take ourselves out of the situation, and the guys that are looking after him, that are trained to deal with it. So,
have you ever been offered? Obviously, you've mentioned crisis teams and things, and how you had people, complex behaviour teams, and other professionals coming to support you. Has anyone ever provided you any training on what to do when those things happen at home?
We did ask for restraint training as Harry got older. Probably when he was 16, we asked if we could have some restraint training, and we was told by social services that the regulations change so often that they can't be responsible for teaching us how to restrain Harry in case then the regulations change and we're using an old.
Were you ever shown any protective interventions in terms of how to keep yourselves?
No. And we did ask. It was something that we asked for.
I'd just like to thank you both, Pat and Julie, for taking part and coming along to be in our podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
And thank you for listening to another episode of This Isn't in the Handbook. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please remember to like and share our podcast, leave us a review, and enable notifications so you know when the next podcast episode is live.